guys, this is Miss 3. Today is Thursday, April 30th, and today we are doing Geology Lesson 15, Unit Review Part 1. So we're at the end of our Geology unit. Normally we would be completing an assessment, but because it wouldn't really be in your best interest to do an assessment from home, we're going to be reviewing everything that we've learned in terms of content, morphology, and grammar. So there's going to be about 3 different assignments that you need to complete today, but there's not going to be any additional reading. So these are your lesson objectives. You're going to be working with commas and quotation marks. You're going to be using root words, ruts and graph and sentences, and you're going to be using commas correctly in dates, addresses, city, state, and items in a series. Remember, geology is the study of Earth's characteristics, what it's made of, and the forces and processes that shape and change it. Reviewing commas. Remember, commas in a date. The comma should always be placed between the day and the year. So, example, January 2nd, 1992, the comma goes between the 2 and 1992. It always goes between day and the year. Pretty simple to remember. The next way is between a address. It's in an address and between a city and a state. So the comma always goes between city and the state, regardless of whether the state is written out completely or whether it is written out with an abbreviation. So, example, I visited my relatives in Birmingham, Alabama. Birmingham is the city, Alabama is the state. So we are going to put a comma in between Birmingham and Alabama. Now, again, if there's an abbreviation like Washington, D.C., D.C. stands for District of Columbia, there's still going to be a comma in between there. It doesn't matter. Washington, comma, D.C. It always goes between city and state. Same thing like Syracuse, New York. It would go in between Syracuse and New York, regardless of whether New York was written out or whether New York was abbreviated NY. Next is reviewing commas in a series. Remember, commas in a series is when we're listing something, and we're taking a pause, a breath in between different things. So we always put a comma after everything except for the last item. The comma does go before and or the or in the list. So example, we went to a museum, a park, a theater, comma, and a restaurant on our trip. So a lot of people are making the mistake in not putting the comma in between the comma and the and, but this is still another item on your list, so it still gets a comma. It just doesn't get a comma after this because the list has ended. So remember that there always is a comma before the and or the or, whatever word is here, in the last item of the list. So you are going to complete the comma Google Docs. You can see comma review right here, so you're going to complete it. There's examples on here, so make sure you're not sending me anything that's blank. You're just going to keep getting it sent back over and over again until you complete it. Complete this, submit. This is reviewing commas and quotation marks. Remember, we use a comma to show a pause and just separate the first part of the sentence. Example here, the text states, from what is actually being said. Remember, what is actually being said, or what is actually taken word for word from the text, needs to have quotation marks around it. So even though someone's not actually saying this out loud, the text is saying it, we're still putting quotation marks around it because it's not our own words. It comes from somebody else. We took it from someplace else directly. So make sure that anything that actually comes word for word from either somebody else's mouth or from the text has quotation marks around it. So this is pretty easy when it's not split, because this is a regular quotation, like this is a regular quotation and like text tag that is pretty straightforward, but it gets a little bit more complicated when we have split and interrupting quotations, because we could take a pause and say, like this one, erupting volcanoes, the text states, are dramatic natural events. Now, remember, we only put quotation marks around what is actually being taken from the text or somebody is actually saying out loud. So nobody is actually saying out loud, the text states. Like, the text is not saying, and I stated, like, that's not happening. So we're going to put quotes around erupting volcanoes and are dramatic natural events. Remember, the comma is used to separate what's actually being said from the text tag, which says the text states. So we put a comma after this, after volcanoes, and you put a comma after the text dates, because we're kind of like blocking off and sectioning off what is actually being said and the text tag. And that tells us that a pause is needed, like we need to take a breath and pause that. So that's why we use those different things. These are additional examples that you can look through of split quotations. I know they can be a little bit tricky, but you're going to see them all the time in text for the rest of your life. So we just need to know what they mean, and we need to know how to use them properly. You are going to complete the quotations and comma doc. You can see it right here. Open it up. Taking a second. There you go. There's an example right here of a split quotation. There's like all different kinds in here, but make sure that you're putting the commas in the proper place and the quotation marks in the proper place. You need to do both Google Docs in order to be entered into the raffle. Also, you're going to review the word rupt. Remember, it means to break or burst. These are examples of that. Also, review the suffix ly. Remember, we put ly on the end of a word. It means in a blank way. You are going to be using this when you complete the morphology review on Google Forms. Make sure you are doing your best work. You're going to be working with those root words and the suffixes. If you have any questions, let me know. Make sure you're doing your best work. I can tell if you're actually doing your best work or not at all. And remember, only your best effort and fully completed assignments get you entered into the pizza raffle. Most of you are doing a very good job. Keep it up.